This week, the days after Shavuos is known as the Shavuos Yimei Tashlumin. It's maybe really the 6 days after Shavuos. Tashlumin of what? So the Gemara in Chagiga Daf Yud Zayin, the Gemara says, Sukkot and Pesach, one brought karbanis. There were 3 karbanis, Oila Siriya, Shalmei Chagiga, and Shalmei Simcha. 3 karbanis that Oili Regel brought. So Sukkot and Pesach, you had the whole week to bring the karbanis, whether if it was Medin Tashlumin or not Medin Tashlumin, but you had a whole week to bring it, all Yom Tov long, the whole Sukkot and the whole Pesach. Shavuos, it's only 1 day. So what happens over there with the karbanis? If somebody did not bring it, the boy YOM of Shavuos. So the Gemara says, a chiddush, with a drasha, that if you didn't bring it on Shavuos itself, you have another 6 days after Shavuos to still bring it, even though it's Chol. Sukkot and Pesach, we understand. You didn't bring it the first day, you could bring it Chalamoid, it's still Sukkot, it's still Pesach. But to bring Shalmei Chagiga after Shavuos, Mehechat Esa. So the Gemara says, Omer Reb Laza, Omer Reb Oishia, Menayin Latzeres Sheyesh La Tashlumin Kol Shiva. They have Tashlumin Kol Shiva, which means you have another 6 days, you have a whole week as well also. So the Gemara says, Shenemer B'chag HaMatzos, this was the Kriya now this week in Shavuos, B'chag HaMatzos, B'chag HaShavuos, B'chag HaSukkos, Makish Chag HaShavuos, L'chag HaSukkos, L'chag HaMatzos, Ma Chag HaMatzos Yesh La Tashlumin, Hu Adin, Shavuos has Tashlumin. L'cha'ira, this is very nice, it's a Gemara, but this is Bizman Shebeis HaMikdash HaYakayim, not really negayah to us. We should be Zoichesh Yebana Beis HaMikdash, but l'cha'ira, this is negayah Tashlumin when the Beis HaMikdash was Kayim to bring the karbanas. L'maisa, it is negayah for us, and we'll see a few dinim, but we'll begin in particular Lagabi saying Tachnan. The Shulchan Aruch in Hilchas Tachnan, Siman Kuf Lamed Aleph Siv Zayin the Ramah, Zok the Ramah in Hilchas Tachnan, where the Shulchan Aruch lists out what days you say Tachnan, you don't say Tachnan. So the Ramah says Uminik Poshet Shloi Lipel Apaneim. He goes through V'loi Mitchilas Rish Chodesh Sivan Ad Achar Shavuos. In other words, last week from Rish Chodesh Sivan on, we didn't say Tachnan. The Ramah says till after Shavuos. Doesn't say exactly till when after Shavuos, Pashtas, till after Shavuos, which means for us Shavuos was Sunday, Monday, till after Shavuos, Tuesday, Isra Chag, maybe you would say, but the Ramah in Hilchas Shavuos, Siman Tov Tzadik Daled, Zok the Ramah, Ve'in Oimrim Tachna Metchilas Rish Chodesh Sivan Ad Chesboi. The Hainu Acher Isra Chag, over there the Ramah spells out clearly that you don't say Tachnan till after Shavuos, including Isra Chag, and the Ramah actually says Ad Chesboi. What does it mean Ad Chesboi? Because for us, Shavuos, that's 2 days, our Isra Chag is actually a day later. In Eretz Yisrael, Isra Chag was already Monday. For us, Isra Chag Tuesday, Zok the Ramah, even Tuesday, Isra Chag, you don't say Tachnun. What's about the days after Isra Chag? In other words, this whole week, from after Tuesday. Tuesday, we didn't say Tachnan. What's about Wednesday, Thursday, today? Do you say Tachnan? Do you not say Tachnan? Pashtus from the Ramah would seem that you do say Tachnan. It's maybe more than a Pashtus. The Ramah says you don't say Tachnan until after Isra Chag, which means after Isra Chag you would say. And that's the minig in many places, yes, to say Tachnan. The Shulchan Aruch HaRav says clearly that you only do not say Tachnan till after Isra Chag. In the Luch of Rabbi Henkin, Pashas, you say Tachnan. The minig of the Chazon Ish was to say Tachnan. However, the Magen Avram says you do not say Tachnan. Yesh Makaymis Noigim, not to say Tachnan for these 6 days after Shavuos. And the reason for that is, as he says, is because what we saw in the Gemara says that it's Yimei Tashlumin for carbon, being that it's Yemei Tashlumin for Karban, we don't say Tachnun. As a matter of fact, it's not just a Magen Avram from the Achroinim, it's already before in the Rishonim, in the Shabali Aleket. The Shabali Aleket says the minig in Worms, in Germany, was not to say Tachnun the whole week after Shavuos. And the Rav Yah, also from the Rishonim, brings that the minig of his father was not to say Tachnun all the days after Shavuos. And that's also the minig by many, even though, as we mentioned, that the Shulchan Aruch Harav says yes to say his minig himself, as brought in his Siddur, was not to say Tachnun the whole week afterwards. In Eshel Avram, he's mishabeach the minig not to say Tachnun. You don't say Tachnun because it's Yemei Tashlumin, which is a Gavaldige Chedesh, because even though it's Yemei Tashlumin when the Beis HaMikdash is Kayim, which you could bring, but now there's no Beis HaMikdash, we don't have the Yemei Tashlumin, still, because it's Yemei Tashlumin, you don't say Tachnun. Even though tomorrow may be the last day, tomorrow is Negei, Shabbos, if you did not say Tachnun this whole week, you're not going to say Avarachman tomorrow. Days that you don't say Tachnun, you don't say Avarachman. Tzidkoscha, however, is interesting, it's a little more questionable, because Tzidkoscha, L'mashal, those that don't say Tachnun, Erev Pesach Sheni, it was negated this year Pesach Sheni, any Pesach Sheni, if you don't say Tachnun, the Mincha before, this year Pesach Sheni was Sunday, so what's about Tzidkoscha? So Tzidkoscha, some only don't say Tzidkoscha, only when you don't say Medina earlier, not just a minute. This is a minute not to say Tachnun, so maybe you would say Tzidkoscha. In other words, you'll see even shuls that didn't say Tachnun the whole week, and they're not going to say Avarachman in the morning, it's going to come to Tzidkoscha, they're going to say Tzidkoscha. The minig in Eretz Yisrael Be'ikr is not to say Tachnun. Again, for this reason, it's Yemei Tashlumin. The Eshel Avram extends this reason of why we don't say Tachnun. He says, first of all, it's Yemei Tashlumin, like what the Magen Avram says. V'oidi says, even without Yemei Tashlumin, when Klal Yisrael came to be Oile Regel in the Beis HaMikdash, so those karbonis, we'll speak about it a little bit more by Richa soon, but those karbonis that we mentioned, Oilas Riyah, Shalmi Chagiga, those karbonis, the pashtas were brought on Yom Tov. But if a person had Nedarim v'Nedavas, and he made his trip up to Yerushalayim, so he wanted to take care of his chayv to pay Nedarim v'Nedavas. So people stayed on, Dr. Eshel Avram, the days afterwards to bring their karbonis. And for the people that bring their karbanas, it's a Yom Tov. So even though we don't have the Beis HaMikdash, but for a Zecher, for what happened in Klal Yisrael, for that whole week afterwards, that Klal Yisrael stayed on in the Beis HaMikdash to bring karbanas, it wasn't a Yom Tov for all of Klal Yisrael, but a big part of Klal Yisrael stayed on, and for each individual person was a Yom Tov. Therefore, we don't say Tachnun. So it's really like another reason. First reason is it's a Tashlumin. Tashlumin for the karbonis chayva that we brought on Yom Tov. And another reason besides that is not chayva, but people brought their karbonis, their nedam v'nedavis, that's why you don't say Tachnun. What's about Yud Gimel? In other words, for us that we have 2 days Yom Tov, Sveika D'Yoma, we kept Shavuos Sunday and Monday. So in Eretz Yisrael, it's very clear. They had Shavuos Sunday. The last day they don't say Tachnun for Tashlumin is Shabbos, is tomorrow, which means they're not going to say Avarachman. What's about for us that Shavuos was 2 days? We have Monday also. So really another 6 days from Monday includes also this coming Sunday not to say Tachnun. Do you say Tachnun or not? So the Shari Tshuva speaks about it already. And the Shari Tshuva, he brings those that say not to say Tachnun. And the reason for that is because we in Chutz La'aretz consider Monday, Al Tzveika D'Yoma Shavuos, we know for sure, but Minig Aviseinu B'Yadeinu, we're noyig that the Yom Tov of Shavuos is Monday. We're noyig as if we don't know. Vivait the Yom Tov of Shavuos is Monday, so then you count from Monday another 6 days of Tashlumin. What's bothering you?
Because of the whole thing's on this.
Moiridik, Gevaldik. That's what Reb Shlomo Zalman asks the Shaila very clearly. He says, I don't understand. Gevaldik, beautiful. Reb Shlomo Zalman says, I hear, us in Chutz La'aretz, we keep a second day Yom Tov, because we don't know, Sveika de Yoma. But the whole din not to say Tachnun is based off Tashlumen. The Tashlumen of Karbonis in Eretz Yisrael, there's no Sveika de Yoma. So for them, it's very clear, the first day Yom Tov, one day Yom Tov, Sunday. So from there you have 6 days of Tashlumen, not including this coming Sunday.
Shavuos is based on it. It's not supposed to be second day of Shavuos. Because by 50 days we already figured out what happened.
Very good. So that's a complete shear for itself. Why do we keep a second day Shavuos? There is no Sveika D'Yom at all. It's 49 days after Pesach. And by then already we know for sure when Pesach was. Yeah. That's a separate discussion. We're not going to go into it now. Good. That's its own shaila. But the Metzias says we keep 2 days, and it's midigav esedi b'yadeinu. Like the Shari Tshuva, that the reason why to hold another day Tachlin is because not to say Tachlin is Tashlumen. Yes, like the Shlomo Zalman. Then no, the Beis Hamikdash there's no Sveika D'Yoma. But what's Taki Yed Pshat? What's Taki Yed Pshat? Not to say Tachlin Sunday. It's only in Tashlumen. There's no Tashlumen on Sveika D'Yoma. In Zichron Yehuda from the Maram Ash, a Talmud of the Chassam Sofer, says the reason why we should not say Tachlin, Be'etzem it's Taka right. It's minigav. It goes based off the Beis Hamikdash, and there's no Sveika D'Yoma. But Kadei Shaloi L'Zalzel, not to be Mazalzel in Yom Tov Sheni, we keep it as a real day, meaning to say is that it's mamash a Yom Tov, but often that we even keep it klampy 6 days of Tashlumen afterwards also. That's what he says. It's interesting, at that Kufa, it seemed like the reform was starting to, that's what they were being like picking on the second day Yom Tov, to be Mazalzel. There's quite a few tshuvas. Chassam Sofer, we mentioned it over here, but the Chassam Sofer has a tshuva. Somebody wrote him if you're allowed to write a get on the second day Yom Tov, a whole tshuva. But he goes very stark that maybe the second day Yom Tov is even more chomer than the other second days Yom Tov, relevant about that part we mentioned when we learned Hilchos Yom Tov in the night coil in the winter. So I spoke about it the second day Yom Tov, but that's on the concept of being machmer. So Lamaisa, do you say, if you don't say Tachnun all these days after Shavuos, what's about Yud Gimel? Lamaisa, what do? This Sunday, you'll be in a shul, what do? Do you say Tachnun, do you don't say Tachnun? So the Shashuva concludes, the Ovid Kamar of the Ovid Kamar. So what do? He says you do what the Shliach Tzibur, what the Baal Tefillah does. So I'm not sure. If you're going to be the Baal Tefillah, what should you do? I don't know. But if you're not the Baal Tefillah, whatever the Baal Tefillah does is good. So we have over here that is a Tashlumin Kol Shiva of the Beis Hamikdash of Karbonis is negated to us, Lagabi not saying Tachnun. There's another din that's brought in the Chayk Yaakov. It's a very big chiddush. He says because it's a din, because these days are Tashlumin for the Karbonis Bizman Beis Hamikdash Kayim, it's a gavaldig chiddush. Just like Sukkot and Pesach, which is a clear din, halacha l'maisa, if somebody forgets to make Shechiyanu the first day Sukkot, he can make Shechiyanu throughout the whole Yom Tov. Pesach as well also. Says the Chayk Yaakov, the same thing is also Shavuos. If you forget to make a Shechiyanu, if you forgot, today, we're Friday, you forgot to make a Shechiyanu in the beginning of the week of Shavuos, you can make a Shechiyanu today. It's a chiddush gadol, because l'maisa it's already after Yom Tov. Shechiyanu l'zman hazeh, it's not Yom Tov anymore. But he says, based off what the Gemara says, a chiddush, hukash to Sukkot and Pesach, the tashlumen, to bring karbonis is also a chiddush gadol. You bring a carbon today, a Yom Tov carbon today, it's not Yom Tov. So he says, Shechiyanu also you could. L'maisa it's a chiddush.
When would you say it?
What'd you say? Just like you say it on the Yom Tov, you don't have to say it over anything. Just Sukkot and Pesach, yes, Avada, definitely. It's on the YOM. It's not a particular on the Sukkah or something on the YOM. I don't think you have to over a kais. The kais is a din kiddush alayayin, but to make a shachiyanu, person remembers third day chalamoid. You forgot to make a Shechiyanu, you make a Shechiyanu right then and there. Shechiyanu on the Yom Tov. No, is that
Like in Kippur.
what'd you say?
Like we do in Kippur.
Yeah.
The same machlokes about Sunday would apply to this halacha as well. Make a shechting on Sunday.
Good. Yeah, I don't know, Taka. Very low. Lamaisa, it's not la halacha. It's not la halacha. You want to know if Sunday, if a person remembers Sunday, Yud Gimel Sveika de Yoma. The Chayrit should be telling the same Shaila, Lagabi, the same Shaila of Tachnan. Lamaisa, this is not la halacha. If you forgot to make a Shechiyanu, don't make a Shechiyanu now. It's not la halacha. The Yerabas Chaylik, the Sharet Tzin, the Chavetz Chaim brings. He says, how can you make a Shechiyanu? It's not Yom Tov. Prima Gadim la halacha says not to. Another pointer, Lagabi Tashlumen. This is not a din, but it's call it maybe Anhage Toiva. There are a lot that go Sholish Regalim. They go to the Kaisel. It's a discussion for itself, but those that are noyig. So Chalamoy, it's a Sukkot and Pesach. You get onto a bus, you take the bus and you go to the Kaisel. What's about Shavuos? So there are those that which can't go Shavuos or didn't make it to Shavuos or didn't go Shavuos. When after Shavuos, it's no chiyuv. Rabbi Shlomo Zalman they bring. Rabbi Shlomo Zalman used to go Shavuos, and if he couldn't make it Shavuos, he used to go after Shavuos. So the Indian of Tashlumen, this is not a chiyuv, not to make a chiyuv a din of the Shulchan Aruch, but the concept, just like these Tashlumen of Karbanas of the Beis Hamikdash, Tashlumen for going, so to speak, for Oile Regel. Another din, final din Lagabi Tashlumen, is Yeshla Histapik. We should be Zoicha for Mashiach, for the Binyan Beis Hamikdash now, today. Reb Shlomo Zalman has a Chakiri, declares, are we going to bring these Karbanas? It's Lamaisa, it's the Yemei Tashlumen. So he's Mesupah, could be it's only Tashlumen, Vivayt, Shavuos, Yimachuyev, Zman Simcha, a whole discussion, but he's Mesupah about it. But often that the Tashlumen should hopefully even be Negeya to us, Sheyibana Beis Hamikdash, we might have to bring the Karbanas. I want to move over to another din. This din is really a din just for Isra Chag, and we're already a few days after Isra Chag, but however we'll see throughout the reasons to bring out clarity, the difference between this din of Isra Chag and throughout the Yemei Tashlumen. The Shulchan Aruch says these are Isser to fast, Isra Chag Shavuos. Shulchan Aruch only says it by Shavuos. Siman Tov Tzadik Dalet Sif Gimel. These are Isser to fast on Isra Chag. Doesn't say these are Isser to fast all the days of Tashlumen. Only Isra Chag. There are many reasons for this why these are Isser to fast on Isra Chag, Shavuos. The Magen Avram. This is a different Magen Avram, not the one we mentioned earlier. Lagabi Tashlumen called Shiva and Tachnon. The Magen Avram says the reason why these are Isser Tainus the day after Shavuos, says the Magen Avram, the Gemara that we mentioned in Chagiga Yud Zayin, over there the Mishnah says, Lefi Beis Hillel, if Shavuos fell out on Shabbos, then the Karbanis, these Karbanis that we mentioned, the Oilas Riyah, these Karbanis were brought Sunday. Like the Mishnah says, YOM Tevoyach, the Karbanis were brought Sunday. Lefi Beis Hillel, says the Magen Avram, because on a year when Shavuos falls out on Shabbos, the Karbanis were brought Sunday, which is a Yom Tov. Our Yom Tov is Aser Behesped V'Tainis. Memela, it's Aser now also. Even She'ein Beis Hamikdash Kayim, very interesting, because it's only in a year that Shavuos fell on Shabbos. A year that Shavuos didn't fall on Shabbos during the week, so there was no the next day. There was a din Tashlumen, but Tashlumen's called Shiva. In other words, this din of bringing the Karbanis the next day is not just Tashlumen. Tashlumen means it didn't work out for you to bring the carbon for whatever reason. You have days to make it up. But here we're saying the Iker Zman HaKarban was Sunday, when Shavuos fell out on Shabbos. Sagt der Magen Avram, that's what is Isser Tainus across the board. Another reason why there's an Isser Tainus, and this is Mavur on the Shulchan Aruch Harav, and he says, not Lefi Beis Hillel when it's only on a year of Shabbos. The Mishnah says that Lefi Beis Shammai, these karbonis that we brought on Yom Tov, Shalmi Chagiga, the Oil Asriya, these karbonis were never brought on Shavuos. They were always brought the next day. Memela, it's not just like what we said, Lefi Beis Hillel, in a year when it falls out Shabbos. Every single year, the day after Shavuos is when the karbonis were brought. And Memela, it's a Yom Tov, it's also Behesed V'Tainus, even B'zman She'emes HaMikdash Kayim. Now you're going to ask me, very nice, that's Beis Shammai. It's very nice what you said. L'chayra Magen Avram said Beis Hillel a little bit more of a doichik, because we paskin like Beis Hillel. So what Beis Shammai, we don't paskin like Beis Shammai. So he says himself, the Shulchan Aruch Harav, it's interesting, there's a shaila in the Girsa. Either he says that even some of people of Beis Hillel were noyeg like Beis Shammai, or at least the people of Beis Shammai were noyeg like Beis Shammai. So you had a chelik of Klal Yisrael that always brought karbonis the day after Shavuos. So therefore, there's an Isser Hespeh V'Tainus. Again, Lefi the Magen Avram, the reason why there's an Isser Hespeh V'Tainus on Isra Chag is because in a year, a circumstance, a Shavuos fell on Shabbos, you brought it the next day, so it's a Yom Tov, and then, so we never, it's always Asa Behesed V'Tainus. The Shulchan Aruch Harav says that it's not only once in a while, every year there was a chelik of Klal Yisrael, either even people from Beis Hillel or even Beis Shammai, that were noyig to always bring their carbon the day after Shavuos. Isra Chag. Oh, so he's saying the din is also outside Shema Asad. Yeah. Shema Asad, we're passing like Beis Shammai, so Meila Asad also, we're going to Asad Asad V'Tainus. I think some say this Tashlum and the reason Al Tzchar of Beis HaMikdash, Zeicher, or maybe someone says also Al Tzla Asad. The Mishnah Lamelech asks, why is there a Isser, he asks more on the tour, but he asks, why is there a Isser Hesped V'Tainus? On Isra Chag, we just saw in the Magen Avram, we saw Lefi Beis Hillel. Lefi Beis Hillel when it falls on a Shabbos. So he says, Vivait Be'ikr, you really brought it on Yom Tov, why should Shavuos be different than any other Yom Tov? Why should it be different? And all Yom Tovim. In other words, Vivait is saying that it's Lefi Beis Hillel, they brought it on Yom Tov. Lefi Beis Hillel, they brought it on Yom Tov. So why should it be different Shavuos than any other Yom Tov? The Lubavitch Rebbe has a very long Sicha, Kedarka, always long, but he explains that this is the reason why the Shulchan Aruch Harav did not learn like the Magen Avram for this kasha. Because Lefi the Magen Avram, Lefi Beis Hillel, what do you mean? On a regular year, you always brought it on Yom Tov. So Vivai, you tell me the next day is the Issa Behesed V'Tainus, it should always be. But Lamaisa, the Magen Avram says, Elamai, the Magen Avram himself answers. Am I being clear? The Magen Avram himself answers. The Magen Avram says, you know why Issa Behesed V'Tainus? For a year that Shavuos falls on Shabbos. Right? That's what we said. The Magen Avram says, Shulchan Aruch Harav says it's Lefi Beis Hillel every year. But the Magen Avram says, well, I want to explain myself. It's for a year that Shavuos falls on Shabbos, and you bring the karbonis the next day, and maybe it's also Behesed V'Tainus. Frek the Mishnah Lamelech. The Mishnah says that when Shavuos falls on Shabbos, the Mishnah says that it's Mutter Behesed V'Tainus. The Mishnah. Why? Because the Tzaddikim learned it's Memachras HaShabbos. Right? Memachras HaShabbos means literally the day after Shabbos. And Memela, Sai the Omer and Sai Shavuos was always on a Sunday. So the Mishnah says, if Shavuos falls on Shabbos, it's Mutter Behesed V'Tainus Sunday, So the Tzedaikim shouldn't say, look, Klal Yisrael also behesva v'tainis, because Sunday is really the Yom Tov, they're going to Machas HaShabbos, when really it's Shabbos. So again, what does the Magen Avraham say that the reason why it's also behesva v'tainis is for a circumstance when it falls on Shabbos? They brought the Karbanis Sunday. Yes, they brought the Karbanis Sunday, but there was no issa behesva v'tainis. So in this particular kasha that the Mishnah Melech asks, how could the Magen Avraham say it's also behesva v'tainis? L'chayr, the Mishnah says that it's muter behesva v'tainis. The Machzas HaShekel answers al pi the Levush. The Levush says that being that in today's day there are no tzedaikim, even if there's a little bit, even today the Shomronim, there's a little bit, but it's not really, it's not a powerful movement in Klal Yisrael that we have to be concerned about the tzedaikim. Memela, the din is that it's also behesva v'tainis. You're going to ask me, wait a second, but why is it also behesva v'tainis? Because of the karbanos, meaning to say it was Bizman Shebeis HaMikdash Kayim, but Bizman Shebeis HaMikdash Kayim there was a tzedaikim and it was muter behesva v'tainis. So how can you say that it's also behesva v'tainis because of karbanos? Bizman Shebeis HaMikdash Kayim there was tzedaikim, and if there was a tzedaikim like the Mishnah says was muter behesva v'tainis, so it should be muter now also behesva v'tainis. No klor shaila. So for that, the Machzas HaShekel himself explains, and the Machzas HaShekel says that there was a time in the Beis HaMikdash before the Tzedaikim. Being that there was a time before the Tzedaikim, and it was also behesva v'tainis, so we're doing a Zeichel Beis HaMikdash, Bisman, that you brought a carbon on a Sunday, brought it in a time before the Tzedaikim.
And the fact that it's like it was a circumstantial thing that depends on the time.
So you're saying really it's really along the lines of what the Machzas HaShekel says, but you're saying you don't have to come a Medafka because it was a time before. You're saying the concept should be, yeah, that could also be a pretty clear musig that Machzas HaShekel says because he was a time, he's myrich about it, that he was a time before the tzedaikim Bizman Beis HaMikdash, that they taka there was karbonis on Sunday and it was also behesva v'tainis. You're saying even if there wasn't a time, but be'etzim it's a zman of iser hesva v'tainis. Yeah, just let's stop it, and I'll very bekitzer, but we're not going to make a new thing. If there was never a concept of iser hesva v'tainis, I'm not sure if we can make it zeichel Beis HaMikdash when there was never such a thing b'chlal. Goes into other cases also. Just a concept, very bekitzer, about something that's a chashash because of the tzedaikim, and now that there's no tzedaikim, batal hachashash. If I remember correctly, I think I spoke about it over here in the morning, Kyle Lagabi the Aseres Adibris standing. It's a whole discussion. Ramosha has a different reason why it's not a problem to stand up at Aseres Adibris, but the problem originates because the tzedaikim said, Aseres Adibris is standing, only that's the Torah. I think the Levush is actually going over there, if not, it's other Achrayim say, the reason you could stand now, stand up for Aseres Adibris, because it's Batla the tzedaikim. You don't have nothing what to be chayshish about. So we have over here, the Viola, two reasons why these are Isser Hesped V'tainis. Reason number 3, the Mishnah Lamelech says, you know why it's also Behespe V'tainis? Because the Gemara says in Sukkah, Kala Isser L'chag Ma'ila L'vakasav Ke'ila Bana. And the Gemara, Isser L'chag B'chila V'shtiya. And Rashi over there says, and Isser Chag V'yesh Oimrim Yoim Sha'achar Chag. So how the Gemara says that Isra Chag you're supposed to b'chila v'shtiya, the mele you can't fast. But it comes out lefi this, it's not only Shavuos. The Shulchan Aruch says only Shavuos, but lefi this it's not only Shavuos. Every Isra Chag, the Gemara says the YOM afterwards. A fourth reason is the Tosis Rid from the Rishonim in Chagiga. It says a Gavaldig Gazach. It says that Shavuos was only one day, is only one day. Mistama, it wasn't possible for all of Klal Yisrael to finish bringing their karbonis. And Mimela, Klal Yisrael continued on after Shavuos to bring the karbonis. That's why it's Yom Tov for Klal Yisrael the days afterwards also. lefi this, it should be asa behespa v'tainis kol shiva. Because Klal Yisrael, they didn't bring just the day afterwards, they brought it the days after Stin Tashlumen. Tosfos Rid says that they couldn't bring it everything on Shavuos, they brought it the days afterwards. So why not Kol Shiva? Dr. Tosfos Rid, first of all, we just can't make a whole week a Yom Tov. It's not possible. Really, maybe we should. It's just not practical. For Oid, Dr. Tosfos Rid, Mistama, Klal Yisrael, they had to get back to business, to go back home. So he says, Mistama, they only stayed one more day. The Iker day that Klal Yisrael stayed on was only the day afterwards. And Memela, Vital, if this, it's only Shavuos. This Isser Hespe V'tainis. Just to be Metzayin, the Radvaz, very interesting, the Radvaz in Shavuos, he brings, when the Gemara says that they used to show the lechem aponim, the nest of the lechem aponim stayed fresh. When did they change it? They showed with Shabbos. So the Gemara says they showed to Klal Yisrael, the chibasam of the Eibishter, that it stayed fresh to the oily regel. So Dr. Advas, Sukkot and Pesach, I understand. It's a whole week, there's always a Shabbos, but what's about Shavuos? So Advas says that people stayed, just I'm into San, people stayed to this Shabbos. Tomorrow, it could be a whole week. Shavuos was Sunday. They stayed a whole week to be able to see the nest, chibasam. I don't know if every week you were able to see it, but they showcased it, Yom Tov, to show Klal Yisrael chibasam. The Friedrich Belzer Rebbe says that's why you say in Yom Tov davening, be Ava, which is a lashon of Shabbos, because the Ava chibasam shel Yisrael, the chibasam shel Yisrael from the Eibishter, was showed on Yom Tov. One more reason, and then we're going to finish. The Stei Chemed. The Stei Chemed says the reason why there's an Isser Hesped V'tainis is because B'doime to Yud Gimel Nisan, there's a whole discussion why it's a Yom Tov that you don't say Tachnun. But the concept is, some say that when you eat the carbon, it's a Yom Tov. And when you bring a carbon on Shavuos, it's Nechel Shnei Yom and V'layla Echad. So the Shnei Yom, it's eaten the next day. So just to conclude, the whole beginning part of the Shir was the whole week is a Yemei Tashlumen, and Memela Yesh Oimrim not to say Tachnun, but that's Choluk Be'ikroi from the din of Isrechag, which is a din, Dino Dar Shulchan Aruch, not to say, not Isra Behesped V'tainis, as we saw many reasons that it's a Yom Tov, it's not just a Tashlumen, but it's a Zman carbon. Have a wonderful Shabbos.
Good.